Hello, and welcome to another edition of Embrace Being Wrong. Today, I want to talk about how your subconscious mind will influence your data analysis. Its perception of a company will change and alter your data analysis. Now, you can see other parts of this series if you want to follow these links here down below. One of my favorite studies out there is a study about Heidi Roizen. She was an IT entrepreneur, very successful. But they found when the students were analyzing the case, they really didn't like her. They wouldn't want to hire her. They would not want to emulate her. So they decided, let's do an experiment and change it. So instead of being Heidi Roizen, the person is Howard Roizen. They gave half the students the case study on Howard Roizen, gave half the students a case study on Heidi Roizen to see how this affected them. And it turned out in both cases, Heidi and Howard, they thought they were competent. But in terms of likability, their willingness to hire her, the willingness to emulate that person, it was very different. Universally, across gender, across race, across any kind of demographic, they liked Howard and they didn't like Heidi. This is your subconscious mind playing tricks on you. Another study I really like was by the World Bank. Here, they have two outcomes. You have Action X. It turns out the good outcomes happen about 75% of the time. If you take Action Y, the good outcomes happen about 85% of the time. So the question is this difference significant from a statistical standpoint? Now, if they framed it from a skin cream perspective, that is, you have a rash, so Action X is you don't do anything, and your rash improves about 75% of the time, or you use the skin cream, it improves about 85% of the time. The question is, does the skin cream work? And people got the answer right about 63% of the time. Now, if they framed it using minimum wage, which is something that's important to people at the World Bank, they found that the correct response rate lowered to 45%. So your subconscious mind had a prior belief that you wanted to feel one way or another about minimum wage, and it affected your ability to do analysis. Now you're saying, Brian, what does this have to do with fundamental analysis? Well, fundamental analysis is something that is extremely susceptible to these types of problems. Now, for example, let's suppose I were to give you some information about two companies, but I don't tell you what these companies are. And you do an analysis. You're determining which of these two companies will be the better investment, which will have better investment returns going forward. I may give this to you, I may give this to a group of people, and you make your determination. Now, the question is, if I now do the same experiment where I tell you that this first company is Coca-Cola and the second company is Pepsi, would your analysis change? Would your preference for which one is going to be the better investment change? And the answer is empirically, it would change your subconscious mind. You have some preference in terms of Coca-Cola or Pepsi that will influence your ability to analyze these companies. Now, the other question is, what if instead of saying Pepsi, it was just some company called Brad's Drink? Would that further change your analysis? And of course, it would too. And when no one knows anything about Brad's Drink, and so your perceptions there are likely different, probably very negative, not knowing what that is. Incidentally, from a trivial perspective, Brad's Drink was actually the original name of Pepsi. Now, unfortunately, these cognitive errors happen in your fast thinking brain, your system one brain. They're very hard to control. So what we need is a plan to kind of put a check on these types of things, right? So first off, what I want you to do is I want you to take the emotion out of your investment. I don't want you to fall in love with your companies. I don't want you to fall in hate with your companies, right? I want you to take that kind of emotion out of it, how much you like their product or whatever. Look at the analysis. You know, your preferences may not be the same as consumers in general, whatever it is. Don't fall in love with any of your processes. Same kind of thing. Always think, how can I improve these? And then don't fall in love with the past. So a lot of times, you know, the company may have done really well for you. You may have held it for 3 years. You want to keep holding on to it. You have some attachment to it because it's treated you well, or vice versa. Maybe you got burned by a company one time. Maybe your investment thesis didn't work out. Don't get trapped into falling for those types of emotions. Now, what I find is in order to kind of circumvent these, what you really need to do is make your process more disciplined. So have a checklist. Maybe whenever you're analyzing a company, you always want to do the same things. You always want to talk to management. You always want to do a fundamental ratio analysis, whatever that might be. Then be consistent about how you interpret these things. So let's say, for example, you're looking at earnings yield. Say, well, if it's above industry average, that's a good thing. If it's below industry average, that's a negative thing. And you have this big checklist of things, and you have these positive and negative influencers, and you say, well, if it's 15% we're negative and 85% we're positive, it's a buy. But you're being consistent across companies. The other thing that I want to do is normalize things. So this is a little more complicated, but put all your data as if the company's stock price was 20. So change your earnings and your sales and all these things as if it was 20. I think you'll find it'll help you normalize and think about things from the same perspective, and it'll kind of take that price influence out of it, or that market cap influence out of there. And I can explain this more if you want to. The other thing is, think about that name thing. So, when we didn't know it was Coke or we didn't know it was Pepsi, we were analyzing it kind of more based on the data. So think about, is there a way in your process you can remove your knowledge of what company you're analyzing from the process? Now, when I have some people to hire and I have a stack of resumes, I do the same thing. So I'll hide the name somehow. And I find that I don't want to know the gender. I don't want to know the race. It helps me look at the data in the resume from that data's perspective. So again, embrace being wrong. Keep in mind that your subconscious mind often is these tricks or these problems are really come to the forefront in analyses like fundamental analysis, where it can be a little bit of fuzziness in it. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks so much. We'll talk again soon.